views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronxtalk. Included in the decision to build the new Yankee Stadium was an agreement to replace the parkland the new stadium occupied. The stadium opened in 2009, and before and since on Bronxtalk, we've studied the replacement parks in Community Board 4. A few months ago, I attended an event in a club across the street from the stadium and happened by one of the parks that's just yards away from the new house that Ruth built, one of many parks that have been in the area for generations. And I was absolutely shocked at the state of disrepair of the park. Further research showed, unfortunately, this neglect runs rampant through the parks in the community board that serves as maybe the borough's most visited. And so tonight, the chair of the board's Parks Committee will be here to review the state of Bronx parks in Community Board 4. And I must say, like we say when there's disturbing video on TV, you are warned ahead of time that the photos of the disrepair and neglect of these Bronx parks are not for the weak of heart. Inexcusable is the word that comes to my mind. So please stick around. You're about to see something that just cannot continue to exist in this borough or anywhere. As a matter of fact, you can have your say too. You call in at 718-960-7261 or send an email to us at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org or post them on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. For the here and now, the chair of Community Board 4's Parks Committee, it is John Howard Algarin. Good evening, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Gary. How are you?
I'm okay, and I was a lot better before I spent a lot of time with the photographs that we're going to present tonight. I have to say, they really, as I told you before the show, they made me quite upset, and we're going to expose them to the people of the Bronx, and everybody can see what's going on over there. But first of all, let's rewind the clock. You did a study or a couple of studies of the Parks and Community Board 4 as far as a year ago, right?
Right. We actually have just completed the third one. Part of the vision when I took over and became the chairperson of the Parks and Recreations Committee for the district was to do a survey of the parks, because people frequently come to the community board and they sit at the committee hearings, but their concern is limited to one park, the park across the street from them. I wanted to take a team of people representative of the community and take them to all of the parks throughout the community, so we knew what we were dealing with. We knew each other's neighborhoods, and we knew the needs, and that's what led to the surveys that we did.
Talk to me about, just so we can lay the groundwork for the people who are watching, talk to me about the process, what you did, and what ultimately what you found, although we're going to illustrate that pretty graphically.
Well, we interacted with the district manager, not only for the community board, but also the parks district manager. He was very helpful in identifying groups of parks and green spaces for us. And so what we set out to do was to identify about 8 or 9 community green spaces or parks to go and visit at a time. We wanted to do it quarterly. And after we identified those, we procured some transportation, and we met on a given summer day or on a fall day.
The we was you and people on the committee.
Right, the committee, Parks and Recreations Committee for Community Board 4. And with the help, if I might say, of Bronx Lebanon, who did provide some transportation for us because they had vans, we started to examine these parks and take digital recordings of not the what you might consider to be an appalling state of litter and things like that reflected
maintenance issues.
Maintenance and structural issues were the key, because we wanted to see if we could bring to the forefront of our discussion with the parks and the powers that be the disrepair of the parks so that we could try to leverage some money, maybe from the Community Parks Initiative that comes from the mayor's office or what have you. But we just wanted to see them improve.
How significant and voluminous are the complaints from community residents about the state of the parks in that area?
Well, it's funny because a sort of apathy is what ultimately takes over, in that some of the people just acclimate. They become accustomed to playing.
They're so used to it.
Right, broken down parks. Others just see it as see them as places to litter or just to kind of scurry past. You know, a dark park that is in disrepair is a dangerous situation for certain sectors of the community. But yeah, I want to balance what I say, because we have beautiful parks in the district. They're just desperately in need of care and upgrade or capital investment. I mean, we have marquee parks. You're talking about the Claremont Park, Franz Siegel Park, which is a beautiful structure right behind the seat of power, which has a pergola and
you say the seat of power, that would be Borough Hall on 161st Street,
absolutely.
Just to clear it up for
absolutely.
viewers.
And you know, you could run programs there, which was part of our vision, to obtain a line item in the budget for a parks administrator to be hired so that they could run programming like live jazz out of Franz Siegel. There's a concession stand that's already built that's being used as a storage house. Or it appears to be a concession stand. You know, we have Joyce Kilmer Park, obviously the redesigned McCombs Dam Park, which has a very active side and a passive side that people don't know, McCombs Dam Park West, which has an absolutely extraordinary water fountain that is kind of in disrepair. All the benches are from the 40s.
Well, we're going to show some of that disrepair. I suppose the beautiful parks and the things that you're proud of, and I can understand why you would be. The concern would be if there is such neglect in other places. Goodness gracious, we don't want to take. Why don't we hold on those pictures? I'll call for the pictures in just a minute. Why don't we hold on those before we show them? Let's just finish the discussion. What you don't want to have happen is for those to be neglected, so those ultimately turn into the kinds of things that we're going to see in just a moment in these photographs.
Absolutely. We're trying to preserve the beauty that we have. I mean, we are the capital district, and I say that with a little bit of self-aggrandizement, and
You're
I mean
entitled.
that for the citizens of Community Board 4. You know, we have Borough Hall, we have Yankee Stadium, which is an internationally known icon of one of the greatest sports in the world. And so our parks should reflect, you know, that grandeur.
Well, I'm going to take it even on a much lower level, more basic level. I'm very disturbed when you say that people become numb to it, or people don't react to it, or they're so accustomed to it. Then that becomes conditional, and that becomes, frankly, conditional to the way they behave, not only in their interaction around the parks, but then all of a sudden it becomes conditional to the worthiness of their lives, what they have a right, as far as I'm concerned, have a right to expect and demand from the people who provide services and provide facilities for them. And if they have that feeling that, well, you know, nobody really cares, then that becomes conditional, and that is a very serious issue. And I'm going to assert this, and then we're going to go to some of those pictures that you got a chance to see. If a young person grows up and that's what they see, they don't do as well in school. They're not going to be as healthy when they grow up. They're going to be disenfranchised instead of engaged and franchised in their communities. And so anybody who doesn't realize the seriousness of this, and if it was one park, I wouldn't be on my soapbox tonight and say, well, okay, we've got a park that we've got to deal with. But I've got a list here and details of 20 different parks in this community that are absolutely in states that are just not acceptable. And you've got to be able to see the connection between the things that I just talked about, and especially the young people, that's what I'm really concerned about, and the state of the way they behave, what they do in school, their ability to recreate, their health issues, et cetera, et cetera. So this is me saying it. You didn't have to say it. But when I saw these pictures, I was beside myself. One issue I just want to get to before we show these pictures, which we don't have pictures of, the tennis center, which was talked about when the stadium was built, the new tennis center, people were concerned that the local people were going to be priced out. Your study found that, in fact, they're being priced out.
Well, I don't know if I'd call it a study. I think what we did is we logically looked at the cost of a seasonal attendance or use of the tennis courts, and we could not justify $200 per adult for the season, given that there's very little difference between a tennis court and a basketball court. A basketball court is a hard surface with a net and you score points. A tennis court is pretty similar. And so what is the justification for charging $200 a person for the season? If you think about it, it creates more.
Whereas you can go out in a basketball court in hopefully any park in the city and just play.
Absolutely. But then you go to a tennis court and, you know, as is their responsibility, one of the dutiful parks employees will come over to you and ask if you have a permit. Now, I think it would be better to just have reservations for tennis courts. Prioritize reservations for an hour. Once a person is done, or if there are people on a court and you have a reservation, rather than have a parks personnel come over and say to you, you got to leave, you don't have a permit, then they should move to an open or some other court that might be available and just give priority to the permit people. Because throwing people off the courts really ramps up the tension. I mean, if I live in a community and the tennis courts are empty all the time because people are being priced out, if we're going to embrace that term, if they're being priced out, and also administratively, if you're creating a system where they have to have a computer or go to some remote location to get a tennis permit, then what you're really doing is you're adversely impacting the minority and underclass.
Just real quick, because we have so many pictures to show. This dialogue has happened. Is there any movement on it? Is there any discussion of it?
Well, we have a new parks commissioner that is very receptive.
In the Bronx?
Yes, Iris Rodriguez-Rosas. She's wonderful. I hear nothing but good things about her. I've met her, and she seems to be really eager to address many issues. Now, I can't tell you that because the parks permit issue is a citywide issue.
Right.
It really is greater than the district.
So the point is, I do want to move ahead. You have raised it. We have presented it on the show, and hopefully there will be some reaction to it in the long haul.
Hear.
All right. He says with his cup of water, his cup of Bronxtalk water. All right, so let's just show some of the pictures. Dahlia had put up the first one. So this is Arcilla Playground. This is the kind of thing that concerns me. This is completely repairable, completely maintainable. Do you want to comment on this particular shot? It's clear that these steps on I guess it's a play thing, are just, somebody could really get hurt.
Well, the condition of the apparatuses in many of the parks were not something to be proud of. If you take a look at the swings were missing.
Yeah, so let's just go through this. So here's Claremont Park, and you were talking about some of the beauty of it. What is the purpose of having these swings without swings on it?
Yeah, and the retaining walls from the park, this majestic park, it's huge.
All right, let's get the next one as well.
And this highlights some of the missing things that children would use to enjoy fully the park, and they're just not there.
Let's let them roll. Now, this kind of thing just disturbs me greatly. People sitting on a bench. You could have, let's say, children and young kids running around the park. Parents would sit there. Let's go back to that other one, if you'd be so kind. To that last one, yeah. Parents would sit there, and the cement is simply rotting.
Yeah, there's a lot of spalling of cement. Actually, a lot of the pathways through the park are in a pretty bad state. Almost all of the basketball courts need resurfacing. I have to I really have to give a shout out to Goble Park community because they actually took it upon themselves. They painted and restored from their own pockets, from what I understand, a lot of Goble Park, and they run basketball leagues out of there. And that's wonderful for the citizenry to do that. But it's still the responsibility of our electeds and also the
These
city
are city
to do
properties.
it.
Let's
Right.
Okay, so let's keep going there, Dahlia, if you'd be so kind. So these are ball fields, and you know what bothers me tremendously, on the bottom you can see the ball field. What bothers me tremendously is I go to, frankly, other neighborhoods or even other places, and you have nice cut grass, you have infields that are dug out, and here our kids are playing on this, and I can understand somebody saying, you know what, people don't respect me as much as they ought to. Now, this is another shot of Claremont Park and a lack of paving of I guess, a walkway.
Right. The pathways, once again, reflect, they're just poor condition, and they need to be resurfaced. And, that's passive use walkway, but...
But that means that let's move to the next photo, if you would. Nobody has maintained this. For how long? Have any of these parks been maintained in any period of time?
Well, that's an
Dahlia,
internal question
forward, yeah.
to the park, but I will tell you that...
Leave that one up.
That sort of condition of a walkway is, as a lawyer, which I am, all you have to do is have an engineer. Someone walks, trips, they fracture an arm, and then the city becomes liable for great sums of money because an engineer will be brought to the scene and say, this has existed for a long time.
Yeah, not to mention that a 12-year-old now has a broken elbow.
Right.
Now, this was fascinating because in my neighborhood, they've done the same thing. They basically, if they don't want to maintain something, they simply fence it off, and then nobody can get to it, and it becomes like a little a rodent domicile.
Yeah, I call Corporal Fisher Park the park that isn't. I mean, it was historically dedicated to a Corporal Fisher. And when we went, it was on our list of sites to see, and when we went to see it, lo and behold, it's a lovely plot of land. They have brand new buildings being built across the street and other buildings being refurbished. And it's an ideal place for a park to exist.
How large an area is this? Is that was fenced off? Look at the disrepair in that. That has been neglected. Yeah, that has been neglected for how many years?
You can tell by the look of the piping and also the column that holds that piping that it's been that way for a very long time.
Decades. How large an area was that fenced off area, by the way?
It was about 2 acres, if you asked me. Wow. Because it went all the way down to University Avenue, 170th Street, I think, and Nelson Avenue was the other corners. And
right.
And it received a lot of media hype at first when DNA Info wrote an article based on my presentation to the community board.
Right.
But, these things, if you don't stay on them, they kind of simmer down. And so I'm very glad to be here with you to shine a light.
Finally, and this is another look at the fields. Could we get back to that tree picture? That tree picture is very interesting to me. It was just previous to that one. The city made a big deal about planting 1 million trees, but here's a tree, and clearly there are animals living in there, whether it be rodents, squirrels or whatever. But this tree has seen better days. We planted 1 million trees, but we didn't maintain the ones that we had.
Yeah, we have a lot of rotted, overaged trees. If you go to Mullally Park, they had to cut down about 8 of the grand trees, and that's due to park misuse because people cordon off large sections of the park, and then they have barbecues that they're not supposed to have, and they dump the coals at the foot of the tree. And, there's a lot of sensitivity there as to how to deal with the public because green spaces are so important to health.
But of course, and so you've got to be able to say, well, these parks you're allowed to bar. They do this in every neighborhood in the Bronx. Well, you're allowed to. You police it properly. And these parks have just absolutely been neglected. I'm not yelling at you. I'm yelling at everybody else. I'm mad.
Right. Well,
and anybody who sees this should be mad as well.
And it's very easy for us to start really just going on and on about the negative. They are beautiful parks, and we always want to enlist people's cooperation in bringing attention to the need. And so, but the obvious is the obvious.
Yeah, well, you're being too kind. I'm sorry, I'm not as kind. Let's put more up there. What else we got? Pictures? There we go. So this is, which park is that?
Okay, that is actually Jerome Slope, and it's okay. Wait a second, I see it is Franz Siegel
Yeah,
Park.
and so what really shocked me about this looks like, are those wires? Those are actually exposed wires out there?
Yes. For a second, I thought it was the wall in Jerome Slope, but they do have areas like this where there's broken retaining walls and wires exposed.
How can we have exposed wires like that and not have somebody saying this condition is not good for young people or anybody to be playing it? Keep going. I'm sorry. It's me saying it. You don't have to say it. What else we got, Dahlia? Let's move them across. Let's see what we got. There are more. There we go. More same kind of cracked railings and things like that.
That's right, and you can tell from looking at it that it's been that way for decades.
Decades
And decades.
So here's Global Playground. Now you were talking about this. Explain to me what this is.
Well, you can see on the right-hand photograph that there's a beautifully painted, at least corner of the basketball court, but here I'm looking at the tree well. The tree root is kind of overgrown in some respect, and therefore the tiling that's been placed over it is being displaced. Yeah. And then there's an area that's gated off between the public sidewalk, that thoroughfare, and the actual park, and you can see what looked like maybe a water housing there in the cement square structure, but there's nothing being done there. So what happens?
Well, I'll tell you what's being done is we're raising rats there because that's where nobody can get to it. This is Grant Park. I just want to read while that picture is up there. This is part of their study that we had. Grant Park is already the site of proposed renovation and street demapping. The project was to be done in stages. However, the development of a series of large sinkholes, as you see right there in the children's play area in the park's southwestern quadrant, has effectively shut down the entire park indefinitely. So even though it's going to be renovated, this is the state of it, and nobody can get next to it. And here's, well, hold on to that. Let's go back to that last one at Grant Park. And because I want to talk about this in a second. But that means that park is closed up, right?
Yeah, the majority of it is. We've been trying to see how to reopen it. We even spoke about making a street park at one point, for which programming our very on top of things Councilwoman Vanessa Gibson met with us also about the park. And we're all trying to create some sort of programming that would effectively maximize the use of the street until the funds can come up to restore the fact that parts of the park, particularly the children's playground, the basketball court, are sinking. There used to be tenement buildings there historically many, many years ago. Apparently, in filling in the foundation, they did an okey-doke or not so good job. And that's causing the sinkholes, which requires great money.
I want to go to the next one. How is that pronounced? Keitch Park?
It's really Kelch.
Kelch Park.
Right.
Okay.
It's Keltch.
But that is, again, places for rodents. Let's run through a couple more of these pictures while we talk, because we only have a couple of minutes to wrap it up. John, so this is all about money? Is that what this is about?
Well, yes. Absolutely. It is about trying to leverage the attention of the electeds and of the city of New York at large and overall to get serious about an equitable investment of funds into the Bronx parks.
This looks to me like this would be hundreds of millions of dollars to fix up these parks, because let me tell you, folks, there's 20 parks listed. We have dozens more photographs. You did yet a part 3. How do we get people to spend money on these things?
Well, I don't know. I'm hoping the money doesn't come in the very obvious way as the demographics of certain parts of the borough begin to change. Then we see the park beautification in those portions of the borough change.
Right.
I mean, we don't need Christopher Columbus to come and discover
Well, we
the
need
Bronx.
some people to give
Yeah.
it some attention.
Right.
There's yet another look at it.
Miriam Playground, so beautiful, such a
Except
beautiful
for those
park,
areas.
except for the fact that
And
it's
there's
in desperate need.
more trees. Listen, John Howard Algarin, we got to go. And we thank
sorry.
you. Well, I think we've made our point. This cannot go on anymore. Elected officials, people who work from the city, I want you, if you think I'm wrong, come on this show and tell me this is okay. This is not okay in the Bronx. It's not okay anywhere, and we got to make a change. And that's why we put it on Bronx Talk tonight. We thank you for your dedication. We thank you for your hard work, and we thank Community Board 4 for caring about the people in your community.
Thank you. It was a
Folks, I
pleasure.
think I'm about out of time. I know I'm just running on here because I'm just steamed about those parks. Let's all advocate to get those things fixed. So I'll just say thank you to Dahlia, thank you to Shirley, thank you to Helen, thank you to Clyde and all the people around us. We'll see you next week. Good night. Clyde, if you would just, even if you say wrap up, but then give me the amount of time
I already knew that I was going to go to college, from a young age. I definitely want to major in political science. After that, I'm going to get my law degree. Then I'm going to come back to Detroit, boost the economy, become the mayor or something, try to make the situation better for other people. I feel like I owe it to the city. I'm determined. It's going to happen. My name is Justin, and I am your dividend.
If you drive buzzed, it could cost you around $10,000. You'll face major legal fees, major fines, and steep insurance penalties. You could lose everything. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Adopting a new pet is a rewarding experience. And shelter pets make super pets. Your new best friend will steal your heart, bring you happiness, and enrich your life for years to come. You can make a difference in the life of an animal. Adopt and bring home a shelter pet today. To find out more, visit theshelterpetproject.org.
If you drive buzzed, it could cost you around $10,000. You'll face major legal fees, major fines, and steep insurance penalties. You could lose everything. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Barry, time is running out. According to my calculations, 1 in 5 kids in America struggles with hunger. How can so many children face hunger when there's more than enough food to feed them all? You're right, Barry. We can help solve hunger by teaming up with Feeding America to get food to hungry kids in communities across the country.
Help Flint and the Feeding America network of food banks get food